Hey everyone, so to continue the series that I started with my first couple episodes, I'm going to now talk about the Atlantic Division. And I found the Atlantic Division to be really surprising to start the NHL season. We're about 30 or so games in, and yeah, so let's get to it. So, with that being said, leading the Atlantic Division and leading the whole National Hockey League is the Boston Bruins. They currently have 45 points. They have 20 wins, 3 losses, and 5 overtime losses. And that it felt appropriate to wear this jersey for this video, especially, even though this isn't a Bruins jersey, it's a Happy Gilmore jersey, so whatever. But anyways, so yeah, Pasternak, who has 25 goals already. 25 goals. He's averaging almost a goal per game. Unbelievable. I cannot even put into words how crazy good of a run that has been for Pasternak to start the season. I don't think he's going to keep it up at this rate. I can see him ending the season with around 55, 60 goals, but nevertheless, he has done a fantastic start the year. That whole Boston Bruins top line, him, Marchand, who has 18 goals and 45 points, leads Bruins in regards to that column, and then you have Patrice Bergeron in the middle, who has over 20 points to start the season, and he's been out lately, and David Krejci has been in his spot on the top line because Bergeron got hurt, and Krejci has thrived as well. He has like 17 points, but Bergeron is, in my opinion, one of the best players in the whole league since he's come into the league. He's the best two-way forward I've ever seen. Besides, I could maybe say Datsuk as well as another player that is just so good defensively and offensively, and Marian Hossa. But Bergeron in particular, I believe, is really underrated. I feel like he doesn't get talked about enough because he won't necessarily put up 100 points like a lot of the other superstars in the league can and do, but everything else he does as an overall player is just fantastic. He's so good in his own zone. He's so good offensively, and he's such an elite passer. He has such high hockey IQ, and he's amazing on faceoffs. He's one of the best guys in the dot in the whole league. And you have that top line with Krejci, and then you have Charlie Coyle has been doing really well for them. He just signed an extension with Boston, same with Wagner. And I really appreciate the fact that they would have made more money in the free agent market had they seeked it this offseason, but they decided to stay with Boston because they are all in on what Boston has to offer and what the team is working around, and all being on the same page, really being in that win mode, knowing that they got to the cup last season, and unfortunately for their sake they fell short, but just having all these players in on the same mentality and the team mentality goes such a long way. And can't say enough good things. Charlie's done really well for them. And then you have like other guys like Danton Heinen, who's been solid. Jake DeBrusk has had a slow start to the season, but he's going to continue to get better. And there's been different expectations with him, especially like 25, 30 goals or less. He currently has 12 points, but he's been picking up the goal scoring lately. So we'll see what happens with him. Besides that, I really don't see a whole lot depth-wise in their forward group, but Boston's continued to make it work because of just how stacked their top line is, and also because of the fact that they are arguably the best defensive team in the league. You have Charlie McAvoy, who isn't putting up the points maybe as much as some would expect, but he gets plenty of ice time each game, over 20 minutes. Then you have Zdeno Chara that just keeps defying the odds of how old he is and really proving that he is still an effective player in this league and will continue to be until pretty much he retires. And he continues to eat ice time every single game, and he does it effectively. And he's continued to adapt his game to make it work in today's NHL. And then you also have Brandon Carlo, has been really solid for Boston too. I like him a lot. He's averaging 19, 20 minutes a game, and he's been really good for them. And then Torrey Krug, one of the most underrated defensemen in the league, in my opinion. Underrated players, for that matter. He's Boston's power play quarterback. He has been so good for them. He has, I think, 18 points, and he just came off of injury recently. He's been picked up right back where he left off, and he's done really well. And overall, their goaltending is the best in the league, too. Then you look at Jaro Halak and Tuukka Rask. They are the prime example of having a 1A and 1B. No matter which goalie you have in there, whether it be Tuukka or Jaro, they're going to give you a quality start night in and night out. And that has, without question, been a big factor into Bruins' early success this season. And I know that we're 30 games in, so almost halfway, but still, the run that they have been on has truly been remarkable. I do think that Boston will make playoffs. I expect them to have a deep run, and I would not be surprised if they made it to the Stanley Cup, if not won the Stanley Cup. But it's still early; things can change. Boston's depth in their forward group worries me, but as long as their top line can keep it up, and Bergeron will be back soon from injury, good things are only going to continue to come with them. So that being said, after Boston, we have the Florida Panthers. Florida currently has 31 points, and that's crazy to see the gap between Boston and Florida and first and second best teams in that division. And Florida has 13 wins, 9 losses, and 5 overtime losses. And Florida has really been a head scratcher for me because at this point in the season, I would have thought that they've been better than what they are, but a lot of things factor into that. Let's talk about some of the positives. Brett Connolly, who they signed in the offseason, has 12 goals for them already. He currently leads the team in their goal scoring. I bet a lot of people didn't expect that 30 games in, or at least close to. But I can't say enough good things about him. He's one of those players that is a late bloomer. He reminds me a lot of the Brad Marchands or the Blake Wheelers, not in the sense of his point production, but in how he's progressed as he's gotten older versus coming right out of the gate into the league and being a solid player. Over the years, he has finally defined himself as a very reliable depth scorer. Whether you have him on lines 1 through 4, he will make things happen for you. And you can definitely expect him to get 20 to 25 goals a season. So you have him. Then you have Barkov and Huberdeau. Barkov, Huberdeau, such a good combination along with Dadonov. Huberdeau currently leads the team with 33 points. Barkov has 32, and Dadonov, I think, has 22. Barkov had kind of a slow start this season, especially goal scoring wise, but he's picked it up lately. They have been so dominant in regards to offense, and they have so much depth for it too, which is crazy to think about considering they lost Jonathan Marchessault and Riley Smith a couple seasons ago in the expansion draft, and they are still making things work offensively quite a bit. Frank Vetrano comes to mind as another good young forward they have. I think he has around 10 points. He's only going to continue to get better given the fact that he gets more opportunities. Dennis Mulligan is an okay center for them. You have all these pieces. Brian Boyle, too, comes to mind, who they signed after starting the season. He has 4 goals, 4 assists. Really reliable defensively, too, and on the penalty kill, and he wins faceoffs. One of the best in the league at doing that as well. And they just have all these pieces. And then even Mike Hoffman, who really hasn't turned it up yet, he only has 16 points, and he's been slacking in the goal column lately. He started the season red hot, but since then, kind of up and down. So it's about finding that consistency with him, but you should expect 30 to 35 goals because that's what he's always been known as. But my problem with the Panthers isn't really their forward group, even though their fourth line isn't that great. Their defense, I don't know how I feel about it. Keith Yandel, the Iron Man, the guy who lost half his teeth a couple games ago and then came right back the next day before the game, got dental work done, and played the game. He has yet to miss an NHL game in his career, and I hope for his sake he never does. He's so much fun to watch. He's a great offensive-minded defenseman. He has 22 points on this year. Power play quarterback for this Panthers team. Aaron Ekblad has been picking up the pace lately in regards to points as well. He has 15 now, and he almost single-handedly won a game for them against Anaheim a couple games ago. They were losing by 4 goals going into the third period. Ekblad was a key contributor on the Panthers rallying back, and then he ultimately had the OT winner in that game. But besides that, you have Anton Strawman, who's solid. He eats minutes for them, around like 20 minutes a game or so, but he is past his prime in my opinion, and I thought that it was questionable for giving him the contract that they did in the offseason. And then you have like other guys like Mackenzie Weegar, etc., and they don't have that depth defensively, and it's really shown because Florida has been one of the worst defensive teams in the league. And their biggest problem, which any hockey fan would probably know by now, has been their goaltending. Sergei Bobrovsky, who they signed in the offseason to a massive, I think it was 7 or 8 year contract, and he has not lived up to the hype by any means. And Montembeault, their backup, has not solidified himself as a backup either. It has gotten to the point where they have Chris Driedger, or Driedger, I forget which way you pronounce his name, who has been an AHL goaltender his whole career since being drafted in 2012. And he finally got his first NHL start a couple of nights ago, and he got a shutout, first win. But then he lost yesterday with the Florida, losing 4-2 to Minnesota. So the goaltending isn't there. and that is a huge problem for me. Thinking that they can make it in the playoffs, I feel that a lot needs to change for them in order to make the playoffs. I hope for their sake they make the playoffs, but I do not know. That's one of those where, as of right now, I would out of the Atlantic, I would say I don't know. It's just tough because you have teams like Tampa, and I will get to them, that are slumping right now. But how long is that going to last? And Tampa needs a lot of things to change. The goaltending needs to be there. And what I don't get about Bobrovsky especially is, why would the Panthers go out and sign Sergei to that type of contract after drafting Spencer Knight, who is the most coveted goalie in last year's draft, in the first round? Why are you going to put that much stock in a goaltender, especially because it's rare for teams to draft a goalie that high, without having the intention of that being their next franchise goalie, their next number one? And if Sergei continues the play he's had, and continues this inconsistent play over the next couple of years, good luck trying to get rid of that contract. And then you have Spencer Knight, who could very well develop to be a stud, and then you just have this hole with Bobrovsky, who's just eating so much cap space and can ultimately become a problem. So that I didn't understand. At this rate, I don't think the Panthers are going to make the playoffs. I think that more things need to go their way. Their offense is dominant, but they need to make some moves, and their goaltending needs to find consistency. So that being said, after Florida, we have Buffalo, who's tied with Florida in regards to points right now. They have 31 as well. They have 13 wins, 10 losses, 5 overtime losses. Jack Eichel is this whole Buffalo Sabres team. For any Sabres fans, they would tell you, since he was drafted, he's already 23 already, which is baffling to me. I feel like he was just drafted yesterday. But he has 38 points on the season. He also leads them in goals, leads them in every offensive statistic, it seems like. And besides Eichel, there really isn't much there. Sam Reinhart has been solid for them. He has 20-something points. You can expect 55, 60-point season out of him. And when you look back, he shouldn't have been drafted at number 3. I mean, I'm not sure where he was drafted. I know he's drafted in the top 3, I believe, a couple years ago. He shouldn't have been drafted in that spot, but he has been a very solid player for Buffalo and has progressed more and more each season, so I hope for his sake things get better. And Victor Olofsson has come out of nowhere. This kid, the Sabres drafted 2 seasons ago in the 6th round. He played his first year in the AHL last year, had, I think, 60 or so points, 30 goals, 30 assists, so talk about even. And this year now he has 11 goals and 10 assists, or 11 goals and 11 assists, not too sure, but he has around 22 points, I believe. He was a goal-scoring machine to start the season. He had his first 6 career NHL goals were power play goals. Thought that was pretty interesting. But he definitely seems like he is a steal for Buffalo, a diamond in the rough, and they should definitely continue to utilize him and see where this takes him and see how good of a player he can be. And besides that, though, there really isn't much else there. You have guys like Jimmy Vesey. Okay, he got hot lately, but how much do you expect from him? You have Marcus Johansson, who, when healthy, is solid, but that's been the problem his whole career. I don't know why Buffalo went in on him in the offseason. It wasn't a terrible signing, but he's been injury-prone throughout his whole career, like I said, so it doesn't make too much sense. Same thing with Kyle Okposo. And then they have Jeff Skinner, who's a bona fide goal scorer, but his defensive game has been lacking, and he's been bounced all around the lineup, especially in the bottom 6 for the Sabres because of that. And at this rate, he is by no means going to have the season he had last year. So let's hope for his sake he can pick up the pace, because they do need more depth scoring besides their top line. And if Skinner can't provide that, then there isn't much else there. And then you have guys like Larson and Gergensons, but they're just fillers. On plenty of playoff contending teams, they probably wouldn't have those kind of players in their bottom 6. That's just my opinion. But then you look defensively, Rasmus Dahlin is going to be amazing. He has continued to progress as a young phenom, but he is out now with a concussion. And then you have Rasmus Ristolainen, who is currently labeled as their best defenseman. He's been picking up the pace offensively. I think he has like 16 points. He helps on the power play, but he has been great defensively. And there were rumors about him wanting to trade this past offseason, so it makes you think of what type of person he is in the locker room. So those are things to consider. And without Dahlin too, it's really showing just how much they lack defensively. Yoki Hyru's been solid from being traded to Buffalo from Chicago in the Alex Nylander trade. But besides that, there really isn't a whole lot. You can say things about McCabe and Miller, but I know a lot of Buffalo fans don't necessarily love them. And then their goaltending is another team in the Atlantic that's their biggest issue. Carter Hunt has yet to solidify himself as a number one. And then same thing with Linus Ullmark. They're not terrible. They have their games where they'll have a 40 save shutout or something, have decent stretches of playing well, but they're not consistent enough. And I feel that until Buffalo truly gets a number one where they can bank on in big games when they need them, that they really aren't going to go far. And that's without talking about the fact that they have no scoring depth whatsoever. Connor Sheary, for example, is a product of Sidney Crosby, in my opinion. He hasn't done much of anything since leaving the Penguins. And I just don't see what this current Buffalo Sabres team, they're making the playoffs. They seem like a broken record, the same type of team that in years prior has had a really hot and fun start to the season, but then quickly downturned and then just couldn't get that consistency in the win column. So I'm going to say as of right now that Buffalo is not going to make the playoffs. So after Buffalo, we have Montreal. They have 30 points, 12 wins, 10 losses, 6 overtime losses. Thomas Tatar currently leads them in the point column with 24. He's been solid, especially since coming over from the Vegas trade. But then you have Brendan Gallagher leading in goal scoring with only 11 goals. The scoring depth is not there in Montreal and hasn't been there for a long time, in my opinion. They've never had that number one, that guy they can really rely on. Having Philip Deneau as your number one center is a head scratcher to me, even with Jonathan Drouin out, and that is really hurting them too. But Montreal just came off of an 8-game losing streak. They finally snapped out of it yesterday, beating the Islanders at home 4-2. And by at home, I'm talking about Montreal was at home. And they just don't have enough there depth-wise. They have some young, promising forwards. They have a great prospect pool, but you look at Lehkonen, Suzuki, etc. They have these pieces, Max Domi too, but they just don't have enough, and they haven't been consistent enough at all. And defensively, they've been up and down. Shea Weber has 24 points on the year. He looks like he's really having a bounce back year and proving a lot of his doubters wrong, including myself, thinking that his best years were behind him, because at the rate he's at and the things he's doing, especially offensively on the power play, he has been killing it for them. Jeff Petrie, who I know a lot of Montreal Canadiens fans feel is underrated. He is underrated. He's a very solid defenseman for them as well. Eats a lot of minutes each game and is on the power play as well. Ben Sherratt, who in my opinion is, if not the most underrated player on the Canadiens, the one of, he came over in the Jet from the Winnipeg Jets last year because he was one of the many defensemen that the Winnipeg Jets lost due to free agency. Sherratt has been really solid for them, has been playing up some of the points, and he's been a really good filler, especially in the top two defensive pairs. With Victor Mete out on injury, especially, he's been having 20 plus minutes on average a night, and he's been really solid. But another team in the Atlantic where their goaltending has just been abysmal. Carey Price is way past his prime. I know that some may disagree with me on that, but he's 32, which isn't even old, and he has been so inconsistent for numerous years now. It's not like it's just been one, it's been a couple. And since the year that he won the Vezina and the Hart, I believe he won those two in the same year, I've just seen regression, a lot of it. And I feel that Carey Price has been unbelievably overhyped throughout his career coming out of Montreal because of how big of a hockey town they are. And I feel that the media has just portrayed him as this otherworldly goaltender when in reality he really hasn't been. And the statistics don't deny that either. Not saying he's bad by any means, but especially in the state he is in now, his best years are way behind him. He's averaging over 3 goals a game. And then if you look at the backup, they don't have a backup. Keith Kincaid was their backup, was doing terrible. Was sent down to the AHL, the Laval Rockets, and then they called up Zach Fucale because they want to get Kincaid more playing time in the AHL to hopefully get him out of this funk. But they don't have a backup, and that's a huge problem in today's NHL. And that's been a problem with the Canadiens for a while, which could very well be part of the reason why Carey Price is regressing at such a young age. I feel like they've overused him tremendously throughout his career, and they haven't picked up on what the new wave of the NHL is, and having 2 number ones basically for goalies, splitting the time close to evenly. And that hasn't been the case with the Canadiens, and I can't even think of the last time they had a solid goaltender as a backup since like Al Montoya and Peter Budaj, and that says a lot. So With that being said, I don't see Montreal making the playoffs at all. They don't have the scoring depth, and the goaltending has not been there. So with that being said, that's going to conclude this video. I'm going to pick up on the rest of the teams in the division and where they stand in the next video, so that way it gets broken up and one video isn't too long. So thanks so much for watching. I'll be putting up the next video pretty much right after I put up this one. And yeah, thank you.